Welcome to Real-Ationship Talk, the podcast where we have real conversations about love, well-being, dating, and relationships. In today's episode, I had a deep conversation about menopause and andropause with Carin Luna-Ostaseski, who is the founder of Hot or Just Me, a comprehensive online shop and go-to resource for managing perimenopause and menopause. Karin's journey with perimenopause symptoms like hot flashes, brain fog, anxiety, insomnia, and night sweats inspired her mission to find a solution. She is also the first American woman and Hispanic person to create a Scotch whisky, SIA Scotch Whisky. The award-winning blend, launched through a record-breaking Kickstarter campaign, has left a significant mark in the industry. You can find out more about Karin's enriching work in the show notes. During this conversation, Carin shares what menopause for women and andropause for men are and how they differ yet intersect in relationships. She also highlights the early signs, physically and emotionally, of these phases and practical steps couples can take to prepare. We explore how to maintain our self-esteem when physical changes like hair loss challenge our confidence. And you will want to hear this astonishing evidence-based practice from the Gottmans that couples can adopt to sustain intimacy, connection, and support during their journeys. Now, this one simple shift will make all the difference. And so much more. You are about to get the whole RLT, aka Relationship Talk, so you are going to want to watch the entire episode. I absolutely fundamentally know that you will find this conversation as vital as I did. And remember to subscribe, hit that like button and that notification bell. I'm Teresha Young, your international wellness and relationship coach. Enjoy. Take notes and get ready to apply all key messages you take away today. Hello, Carin. How are you doing today? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
Me too. Absolutely. Because when we were thinking about what could we talk about, and then we're going to talk about the juiciness of menopause and then also touch upon andropause. And I think that that's going to be a whole new area for people, a whole new understanding and education piece. So I'm so grateful for you joining and having this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fun to be able to offer something to both your female and male listeners when it comes to aging and this time in life.
Oh, absolutely. So, Karin, do share with us a bit more about what led you to being a serial entrepreneur and then also the founder of Hot or Just Me.
Oh, thank you. So, yeah, I've been calling this my third act in life. I am 47 and my career after college was that of a graphic designer and creative director. So I spent 17 years working for major media companies and then Silicon Valley tech startups where I was spending most of my days staring at a computer screen all day long, designing things so that other people could end up staring at their little screens and big screens all day long. And after a while, I was just kind of realizing that this is not what I wanted my legacy to be. And so it was around that time that I was going through a big life change, a divorce actually. And it caused me to have this kind of reckoning with myself of my identity and who am I without this person and starting anew. And I was also realizing like, yes, this is a time of reinvention. So what better time to quit my job and start something new and go into the unknown than then. And so I was finding that time in life where I was finding joy over a glass of whiskey with a lot of friends and spending moments in real life and having these connections. So I realized that that's what I wanted to do. And having no industry experience, I decided to launch a Kickstarter campaign and I started a brand called SIA. And that made me the first woman in history to create a brand of scotch. And I was off to the races. I was able to create a funding program that helps support minority entrepreneurs. And the brand grew to success and eventually was acquired by one of the largest spirit companies in the world. And it was in my 40s that I found myself, looking again, like what's next for me? This time it was a little easier to start a business, but I thought, where am I going to put my passion and this next stage in life? And it was in my early 40s I was experiencing hot flashes. And it was a question I was asking myself and pretty much everyone around me was, is it hot or is it just me? And come to realize that, first it was just me. And second, I was deep into perimenopause, had all kinds of symptoms like night sweats, brain fog, anxiety, and more. And realized then that there weren't a lot of resources out there for women my age to find products and support during this time in life. And so I decided to create one.
Wow, what a journey. And I think it's so relatable, actually, Karin, because when you think about it, it often is a breakdown that leads us to our breakthrough. You were
Right?
going through this whole divorce situation and could be called a breakdown in what you know about yourself, your identity piece. And then it's led
Mhm.
to this phenomenal breakthrough where you've achieved extreme success. And not only that, you've now founded this wonderful business, Hot or Just Me. I mean, even the name of it, people will, it's so relatable, isn't it? Because it's the question, no, is it just me or am I hot? So yeah, that's so important for people to understand as well, these early symptoms. So could you start by actually explaining what menopause and andropause are? And how they affect individuals differently. Because also you've got this whole individual side of it, but when you're in a relationship, they can often meet in a
Yeah,
relationship. It's like what we were saying, where menopause meets andropause. So what does that look
exactly.
like?
Yeah, so I guess as we age, right, you think about your journey, especially as a teenager, right? You have this sudden increase in sex hormones. For women, it's estrogen, for men, it's testosterone, and it happens at this very intense spike, right? All of the body symptoms, the emotion, the skin changes all at once. And then, kind of plateaus through your reproductive cycle. And then around later in life, for women, it can start in your late 30s, 40s, you start to go through a decline in estrogen that kind of doesn't go straight down. Instead, it's a very crookedy up and down on the way down. And so, with these hormone fluctuations, we have all kinds of changes in our bodies that include hot flashes, night sweats, irregular periods, insomnia, fatigue, vaginal dryness, and low libido, brain fog, weight gain, and more. There's almost 100 symptoms that come along with this time in life. And then menopause is the day, it just lasts the one day that you didn't have your period for 12 months in a row. And then every day after that is postmenopause. Now, for men, they have a decline in testosterone, which is called andropause. And what's unique, or not unique, I should say, but what's universal about this experience is that both men and women experience symptoms that are common, like mood swings, depression, headaches, night sweats, weight gain, bone loss. And then for andropause, there are some additional symptoms like low energy, muscle loss. There could be some mild to moderate erectile dysfunction, just a decreased motivation. And, we both experience hair loss as well. So there's a lot that's in common for us at this time in life. And, it goes kind of unrealized that we do have something that we can talk about together as a couple.
Yeah. So is it just me? Andropause is something that is very unfamiliar to me. We can hear about perimenopause, we hear
Yeah.
about menopause, and I still think there's an educational piece on that. Andropause, however, I don't feel like there's enough conversation around that. Is it just me, or is that actually quite a
I'm with
big
you.
conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it was something that I didn't realize until I kind of deep dove research into my business, and kind of looked into hormone replacement therapy and saw that there is testosterone replacement therapy for men to help with their symptoms. And I thought, wow, this is more common than I thought. And then I guess the challenge is that women, we have our periods every month, we have our PMS. And so all throughout our lives, we're very familiar with hormones, right? We're taking birth control at some points in our life. Some women experience hormone fluctuations when they take in vitro fertilization hormones. And then, when it comes time to discuss hormone replacement therapy, HRT for estrogen, progesterone, estradiol. It's a topic that we're kind of already familiar with, but for men, for the most part, the testosterone replacement therapy conversations, this is kind of the first time that it comes up.
Hmm. Now, for men listening to this show, could there be some sort of, I don't want to say the word, like difficulty? Because it's actually quite an area of vulnerability, isn't it? To actually speak up and say that I'm feeling different. There's something different happening within me.
Yeah.
So you've spoken about some of the signs that could show up, for men, particularly and women, hair loss, for example. And I suppose that is a huge aspect of quote unquote vanity.
Mhm.
And how we deal with that, maybe a loss of identity as well. So, what words of encouragement? I'm just going to focus on the andropause section at the moment. What words of encouragement or um, practical ways can men actually navigate that time?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and again, yeah, always the caveat that I'm not a medical professional. I don't claim to be. So I always say for people to just ask their physician about this. If they have an older male physician, it might be something that they're more skilled at. The same thing, for a woman. If you're looking for a menopause provider, the reality is in the United States medical system, doctors only receive 3 hours of menopause training. And I imagine it's probably a lot less for andropause as well. So it's important to find a medical provider that has experience with this. For menopause, you can look at menopause.org, where there's a list of certified practitioners that have taken extra steps for certification. And for andropause, I encourage people to just speak with their physicians to find the right provider for them.
Okay, that's really,
Yeah.
really good guidance there. So, we're talking about what happens when you're in it.
Yes.
What steps can people take to prepare themselves for menopause
Ah.
and for andropause?
Yeah, so I found quite a bit of research and resources, tips and tricks that I've included on How to Adjust Me, as well as products. The one that I think is a universal one for both men and women is prioritizing sleep. So because men and women will both face insomnia and night sweats during this time in life, what I give is some tips about, optimizing your body and your sleep experience with lifestyle tips as well. So the biggest ones that I would say is say your home, right? So keep your temperature somewhere between 60 and 70, or sorry, 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit in your bedroom. And if you can change the schedule, have it kick in, around 10 or 11 p.m. and get colder until about 2, 3, and then start to kind of warm up again from there. Other lifestyle changes, I would say, and this is a hard one, but cutting out caffeine in the afternoon. So maybe switching to an herbal tea in the afternoon if you do need that ritual of having like a warm beverage. And then, for someone, it's funny that was in the liquor industry for 10 years
Yeah.
telling people to drink. Now I'm kind of telling people maybe just drink a little bit less or don't drink at night or, just kind of moderate your drinking because it does affect your sleep cycle. You
Mm.
can wake up around 2 in the morning when your liver is processing that alcohol. And then, triggered with any kind of other anxiety or thoughts you have when you wake up, you'll just go into a cycle of staying awake. And then your bedroom, right? So you think about, what else can you do to outfit your bedroom? And we have a selection of cooling sheets and temperature regulating pillowcases on our website that are fantastic. Sleepwear, thinking about your breathable fabrics or clothing. I personally like this T-back shape nightie because then you get as much skin to the sheets as possible. Eye masks to block out any of that light. Same thing, you can also have blackout curtains. If your partner is someone who snores, I encourage you to get earplugs to be able to kind of drown that out. And then, if you wake up in the middle of the night, how do you get back to sleep? So I try to keep a cold glass of water by the bed. And also, I found a yoga nidra meditation for sleep that's really fantastic. You could just find it on YouTube. So, yeah, I would say, how do you outfit your home and your body for an optimal night's sleep is key.
Yeah. And for many people, that sleep piece is really underestimated. I think
Yeah,
most people we could do with more sleep and just
right.
don't prioritize it.
Yeah.
Equally, what I'm
Well, I
hearing.
tell people, I'm like, say you have a bad night's sleep. The next day you wake up
Yeah.
and you have brain fog, you've got concentration issues, memory issues, you are grumpy, you probably make bad food decisions because you're tired, you don't go to the gym, so you don't get that endorphin rush. And then, when it comes time to get in the mood, you're tired. So it kind of helps to, contribute to that low libido issue as well. So sleep is everything.
Yeah, it is. So we've spoken about that in terms of what you can do physically in your home, sleep, what you can do for your body. What about the mindset piece and the emotional piece? Because you spoke about really just going into your identity as well when you had these changes. Now, this is a probably a whole new identity piece for somebody moving through perimenopause, menopause, andropause. So,
Mhm.
how can people prepare themselves mentally and emotionally for
Yeah.
that? And then also equip themselves for supporting their partner too.
Yeah. Yeah. So the mental piece is a big one. I think, just being kind to yourself, right? And just knowing that everybody's going to go through this, that this is something totally natural for your body. It's just as it was puberty, having, the decline is also the similar. And so just having a lot of self-care, moments of taking good care of your body and of your mind, and finding tools that work for you. For example, I found that meditation is a really big one for me. It wasn't growing up. Like as in my 20s and my 30s, I call it still growing up, right? But I always had like this self-critic saying, oh, I'm meditating wrong, or I'm thinking too much, or I don't know how to do this right, or it's not working, and just all of that chatter, right? And then I discovered later in life a tool called transcendental meditation that's been life-changing for me, where it's 20 minutes and you find the calm that's already there in your mind. And when thoughts come up, they come by and they go away. And just the understanding that that's part of your mind processing that stress or that thought, that it needs to kind of come in and out and let it go. And so that's been a big, big one for me. And then anxiety has come up later in life, which was also kind of a new one. I've never been someone who was anxious, but later in life, I found these moments of feeling like heart palpitations or stress that wasn't there before. And just again, naming those feelings like, hey, I'm feeling this, and to yourself or your partner, right? Or, I'm feeling frustrated when you're talking to your kids, and just naming those thoughts so you're not bottling them all up inside and having them explode later. But just finding that peace. So when you start to recognize the triggers, like it could be too much caffeine, it could be no sleep, maybe you're dehydrated, anything that's triggering that anxiety, to just walk away from it, right? If you're having a moment of high stress in a situation where maybe it's like a lot of visual stimulus or strobe lights or, a lot of loud noises, like get yourself physically out of that situation. Look for a calm white wall to look at, do some box breathing, and find that peace.
That's a great deal of self-awareness to
Yeah.
know and spot your triggers and to maybe even identify a pattern as well. You know, it seems to be every single time this happens that
Yep.
this is the
Yeah,
consequence, this is the result.
exactly.
So what I
Yeah,
always like to, when I'm speaking to my clients is say, okay, so let's go back. What were you doing before that?
exactly.
So
Right.
you go back and you start to identify what the trigger was, and then you can start to know what the pattern is. For example, it could be too much caffeine, it could be alcohol related, it could be stimuli, it could be
Mhm.
certain people in our lives as well. So that's a really,
Yes.
really great point. Also, what I love, what you said there, Karin, is that to label our feelings and our emotions, because quite often we don't sit down to actually call it out, not to name, not to blame, not to shame, but it's just to actually identify I am feeling frustrated, and that's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. And that piece that you're saying around us being kind to ourselves is really good. Have you got any tips actually on practices that can help us to be kind to ourselves?
Oh, I think, find something that brings you joy and maybe make a list of it, right? Maybe it's videos that make you laugh and smile. I remember when I was going through IVF and I had my hormone fluctuations, my husband was so sweet that he found, like, after trying so many things, he's like, do you want to watch some puppy videos on YouTube? And I thought, yeah, that sounds great. So I would watch Golden Retriever puppy videos and they just
Ah,
always made me smile. Or a certain song that puts you like in a mood. If you think about when you were younger and you're getting dressed to go out, like what was your get ready, your dance theme song, and that's always one that kind of puts you back in a positive headspace. Or, having an album or photos of, things that make you smile and love. Like I go through an exercise in the beginning of the year where I do a vision board and I take, photos that kind of bring me smile. So what I've done is I've printed them out and put them on my journal. And so I look at it every day and it's on the desktop on my computer as well as on my phone as the background. So I'm reminded of, what I'm tracking for. And then just people, you've got your speed dial of your girlfriends or your guy friends that, always make you feel better about yourself. So just getting that toolkit. And then if there's something like a guilty pleasure, For example, I have 3 kids. I work full time. So for me, like just having a couple hours and going to the movies by myself during the day is something that I do maybe a couple times a year. But having that bowl of popcorn or, the bag of popcorn to myself and not getting interrupted and just sitting in a dark theater for a few hours, it's just heaven to me. So just whatever that is for you, I encourage you to just like find that and carve out that time for yourself.
So important, that self-care, well-being part, to really
Yes.
take care of ourselves, because we can only be as good for our external relationships as we are for ourselves, for our
Yeah.
internal relationship with ourselves. What I loved is what you shared there is that your husband would say to you about watching puppy videos or something like that. So he knew what was something that could help you and support you in that moment.
And also
And
his limits, right? Like, he's tried everything himself. And like, there's a certain point where like you talk, 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 but you're like, you know what? Let's just watch something that makes you smile.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that takes awareness from him as well. He's observed that there is something else that could be done to support you in that moment. And I absolutely love that. When we were talking, when we were thinking about, what we could talk about during the show, and we spoke about leaning on your partner as a mirror.
Mm,
And I love that concept in where your partner can actually reflect back to you some of your patterns, your behaviors during the time, especially when it comes to menopause and
yeah.
pause. So, and that's really important. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day, but it wasn't about menopause. It was more about his partner. He noticed that when she was on her period, her mood changes. And he made that observation. She didn't receive it very well.
No.
And I don't necessarily think it was his delivery. It could have been. Equally, it was just like she felt like she was being called out, I suppose,
Mm,
for it.
yeah.
So, how can we set up conversations in terms of making it feel like a safe space for people to
Hmm.
be able to make observations and to say
Yeah.
it in a way that hopefully will be received with the love and the good intention that that person has?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great question. I think it's setting up the conversation is just as important as the conversation itself, right? So, it could be like if you like I say this to my kids a lot, like, can I pay you a compliment? And they love hearing that, right? But if I say, can I give you some feedback? Sometimes they're not ready to hear that, right? And
Yes.
they have the question, they have the response, yes or no. And it's the same thing with my husband. And I like it's just, are you ready for a conversation about some notice things I'm noticing, right?
Yes.
And instead of, you statements, it's always the I statements, right? Like I've noticed versus you are hormonal or you are crazy during this time of the month or something, right? Just saying like,
Well,
hey, I've
exactly.
noticed,
Yeah. You
yeah,
might
like
not
I've
receive that
noticed,
so well.
yeah, I've noticed, like we have this shared calendar, right? And on the calendar, I'll put my period because I know, like, I want to track my 28 days, but I also want to track my symptoms beforehand, right? Like my fluctuations, and to just have some self-awareness around my ups and downs, my moods, and physical symptoms as well. And so it could be like, hey, I'm noticing that, you're getting your period next week. How are you feeling? Are you up for some feedback? And so then it's very much like, I'm concerned about you, or, I want you to be happy. And is there something I can do to support you? So just kind of turning the conversation around and just bringing out the best parts of each other and ourselves when we're having these conversations, because nobody wants to be criticized.
Oh, absolutely. Especially if we are feeling a certain way and we're not feeling so good about the
Yeah.
situation or ourselves. I
Yeah.
also, you're sharing so many invaluable tips that I know
Oh,
people are thinking, aha, share my menstrual cycle or share my patterns with
yeah.
my partner. Something as straightforward can be so helpful for the other person. Again, it takes awareness from your partner to make that observation, say, oh, I see that you're moving into a certain part of your cycle.
Yeah.
How are you feeling with that?
Because we don't know sometimes that, or when we're in it, right? You're like so deep in it and you're just seeing blind rage or anger or sadness. Like you can't take that step back and out of your body, but your partner can see it and be that mirror to you. Like I remember I had moments of a little bit of depression after my first daughter was born, where I was just, I guess it's that postpartum depression where I didn't even realize I was in it, right? I was just exhausted and tired and all the hormones and all the IVF and everything. And yeah, just not realizing that there was something even beyond that. until I was out of it. And, during the last maybe 3 or 4 months, I had this episode where my PMS lasted longer than it should. It wasn't like a couple days, it was just like a sadness that was maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So I was starting to get really, nervous about it. Like, is there something bigger going on here? And talk to my doctor about it. And, they had said like, oh, you need some SSRIs. And I thought, wait, that seems a little excessive. Maybe it's just like, let me take a step back and just like see what's happening. And just realizing that, yeah, that sadness, depression, anxiety is a common symptom. So, just asking my partner to say, hey, when I'm in these moments, could you let me know that it's happening? Because sometimes I'm not aware.
It's creating that space and giving permission actually to that
Yeah.
person to be able to step in and make that observation. There's going to be times, quite clearly, when it doesn't land very well, and there might be, and it could be
Repair is necessary. Yes.
exactly. Um, so let's maybe talk about, some of the things in which we can navigate conflict,
Mm.
and some of the best ways, perhaps, that we can have that conversation. What does conflict look like, and how can we navigate that?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big one. I think, yeah, being ready for the conversation, like, is now a good time. And with the goal of, hey, I love you. We're in this for the long haul. Is this a big deal? Is this going to end us? Or can we work through this? Right. And, obviously, if we can work through it, then what are the steps? And both people expressing, what happened from their perspective, and then having that person either respond and say that back to them, like, I'm hearing, or I see that you feel, and so that they feel heard, right? And that you feel that your message landed. And they might not agree with it, but at least they're hearing it and repeating it back to you is a big one. And then saying like, okay, well, what can we do to take steps to move forward and past it and ensure that it doesn't happen again? And so, yeah, I think that, just having a clear plan for how you get through conflicts. My husband and I did a program called the Gottman Institute years ago, and I'm a big fan. And one of the practices that we still do from it is a weekly meeting. So, we have meetings about business, we have calendars for children's activities, but, this biggest relationship of our life, like, it deserves its own weekly meeting, right? Like an hour each
Yeah.
week where you say, and the framework's very simple. It's the same every week, but it's what went well. And you talk about, what went well in our marriage that week, and each person has a turn. And then you say what didn't go well. And then this is an opportunity to talk about something that's maybe unresolved. And then you say appreciations. So 5 extra appreciations for each other about their characteristics. Not so much something that they did, but maybe something they did and that characteristic that you haven't expressed already in your weekly and your nightly appreciations before you go to bed. And then you say, this is my favorite one, is what can I do to make you feel loved this week? And so, it can be anything, something big, something small, but just to kind of set that intention. So that's a little bit of advice that
It
still
is.
works for us.
The key word that's coming up for me there is connection. How
Mm,
important it is to maintain the connection during those journeys, especially if both people are navigating menopause and andropause at the same time, is how
yeah.
can we maintain that connection so it doesn't feel like it's a continuous combat. It's like we're
Yeah.
not we keep fighting and fighting. It's like how can we be in flow? How can we come together as a couple? And
Hmm.
that practice, I think, is so important. And it is also something that I speak to my clients about too. I just say like how can you schedule in these, and it doesn't even have to be like a formal thing if you don't want it to be a formal thing, but it's
Yeah.
really important that we do sit down and we do look at our relationships, just as if you're at work and you have your performance review, with your boss, or you sit down now, how's things going, what's working, what's not
Yeah.
working so well, that kind of
Right.
the same with
Yeah.
relationships too, because what can happen, it will get to the end, it will get to an end point, and it'll be like, well, we just didn't communicate, we just didn't
Mm.
feel connected. So that's a really great way, I believe, to just keep the relationship nourished, particularly during these difficult times.
Absolutely. Yeah, I noticed, if we don't have our weekly, it just quickly goes off the rails. So that's a big one. And then just the end of the night, there's also some other ones that they talk about, like moments of connection, and that there are these 4 key moments each day to build connection with your partner. And that's in the morning, right when you wake up, acknowledging them, a kiss, a hug, hi, good morning. And then there's the moment that you leave each other for the day, right? Your goodbye for the day. Hope you have a great day. What are you excited about for the day? And then the moment you come back together after your day, how was your day? How's it going? And then that last moment before you go to bed, and just wishing them a good night. So having these moments of connection wherever you can find them, and it doesn't take long, but it's just making sure that you have those moments of connection.
Absolutely. So being in the space that you are in regarding like the menopause journey, so what are some of the most common myths you've come
Mm.
across that you would like to just dispel during this
Yeah.
conversation right now?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. I mean, I think that, people think that this is kind of like that they're getting old is a big one. And really, like, this is a prime moment in your life where you've learned so much and you have so much experience and joy. And, you get to have this freedom of identity of, who do you want to be and create. I think that there is a myth that your doctor knows all the answers, when in reality, sometimes you have to kind of be a little bit more of an advocate for your own health if you feel like, that they don't fully understand these hormonal changes that happen at this age. Um, and I think, the one that we've talked about is that men have a version of this too, and that it's a beautiful thing, that we have something that we have in common that we can talk about and understand each other in a whole new way.
Yeah. And I can only imagine as well when you spoke about certain things such as the hair loss, the body changes, the physical changes that come along, that there's going to be quite a big impact for some people on their self-esteem
Oh
as
yeah.
I know you have spoken about being kind to ourselves. Is there, what other ways, I suppose, can we nourish our self-esteem during that time?
Yeah, I think, it's hard, especially for women. In society, we have these, expectations of beauty and how we're supposed to look and be and behave and all of these things, right? And so, for men, success and performance and, machismo, right? And like, there's a lot there that's just to have a little bit more like kindness with ourselves. And our bodies will change, we can't stay the same forever. But, I feel proud, like I've earned my wrinkles, my laugh lines, my gray hairs, even, right? It's a privilege to age. Not everybody gets to get old. It was a quote that I saw recently. I thought that was beautiful, right? That we get to spend extra time on this earth with the people that we love. So, it's important to cherish that. And by the same means, it's just to take care of our vessel, right? This is the body that we've been given, for better or worse. And like, what can we do to make sure that it has the right fuel and that it has the right rest and that it has the right self-love that it needs to go all the way.
So I love that reframe. Like I get to grow old and the beauty
Mm.
behind that. So it
Yeah.
is a case of actually just taking time to witness, I would say, the beauty in it. Now, what's the positives from it? What can I gain from this experience? 'Cause quite often we look at the things that we're losing, isn't it, during this experience? And we
Yeah.
just have a tendency to have that negativity bias where we look at things that aren't quite going right. What am I losing? Rather than reframing it and focusing on what can I be gaining here? Um, I think, with the self-love, self-care journey, if we can get ourselves into a practice of doing that, even before we get to these various different points in our life, it will be embedded. It,
Hmm.
it wouldn't be something that we have to start at a certain point in time, but if we could just nourish it from the
Yeah.
get-go, I think that would be so important. In terms of, because you have spoken about the American system and how the limiting amount of hours that the medical practitioners will spend on things such as menopause and potentially andropause as well. What can we do at an earlier stage? Naomi, how soon do we start really educating ourselves? Does it start from school? Is that when we really should be, getting our feet firmly into this topic?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I have daughters that are approaching puberty, and some are in one of them is showing signs of, one day she was crying and she's like, I said, what's wrong? And she's, I don't know. I don't know why I'm crying. And I thought, I know what you're talking about. I've been there too, and changes in their bodies. And so, I think because I'm in the perimenopause and menopause business, they know these words, right? But most kids don't understand. We talk about puberty with them, but we don't tell them that there will be an end to this as well, right? So starting as early as possible, when we start to have discussions about hormones, there's, a spike, it plateaus as our bodies want to reproduce, and then there's a decline as our bodies are not reproducing anymore. So that, what comes up must come down, right? And so having these conversations, with young people as well, but also with each other, right? I have an amazing community, as I'm sure you do, and our listeners as well, of, I call it girlfriend medicine,
Uh-huh.
where you just, you compare notes. Is this normal? Is this happening to you? And so having these conversations, and it's amazing how many people don't even know about perimenopause, because it's not something that generationally we talked about before. I never had these conversations with my mom. I mean, I do remember, as a child of immigrants, we were very poor growing up, and we had an air conditioning in the house in Miami, but it was also 100 degrees. And my mom would say, "No, it's too expensive, so we're going to put the fans on." And we would always be just sweating. And then I remember there was this period in time where she was just cranking the AC,
Yeah.
but also just like she was like, having these hot flashes. But we were like, "What's happening?" And she didn't know either, right? And so, it's interesting now that we're in a time when people are having conversations more and more about perimenopause, looking up the symptoms, looking up like, is this normal? What can I do? And finding the support and the resources and the tools that they need.
And what you said there, that sense of community is so important because quite often it can feel like a very isolated journey, particularly if you don't have a strong support network too. And even if you don't necessarily have that within your family and friends, there's communities out there. For example, external communities, if you do a bit of research, that can actually support you through the process. And often we don't think to ask for help, because it can mean us being quite vulnerable, you know,
Mhm.
in that space. So I love the fact that you shared that, the importance of having that sisterhood, that we all, or the brotherhood, or whatever you want to call it, whatever hood it is, something that you can do in order to be able to connect with people, because it's all about connection. Now, I believe that you may have some really interesting figures to share, some stats that you may be sharing with us. Is that correct? Instead of 94,
Oh yeah. So this is as our conversation is around relationships, I had touched
yeah.
on the Gottman Institute, and they had their husband and wife therapists, and they have a 94% success rate in predicting divorce, and which is staggering in the course of, interviewing and talking to and witnessing, thousands of couples through the years. But what they realize is that there's the biggest trigger is how couples communicate. And so with that, it's they have um, a system called the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Like, what are the four things that basically lead to a
Apocalypse.
divorce? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's kind of morbid, but it like totally nails it, right? And I, having done this because we were so close to the end, and then this brought us back, is realizing what are these four triggers that damage a relationship. And it's just textbook. Like you can see this happening. So the first one is criticism, the second is contempt, the third is defensiveness, and the last one is stonewalling. So what does that look like? So somebody is upset, tired, angry, whatever, and they criticize the other person versus, saying like, you never do this, instead of saying, I was, feeling neglected when I noticed this happened, right? So there's two different ways to express that. So the person takes the criticism as a personal slight, right? And then they come back at you with contempt, right? So then there's some angry statement that comes out. And then that angry statement leads the other person to get defensive. And then they get defensive and they push back about something completely different or, even worse. And then the last one, it causes the first person to basically stonewall. And that means you just shut down. You just walk away. You're too busy. You're like doing something else and you just kind of like check out for all intents and purposes. And then that's what kind of starts to lead to this rupture in the relationship. And this happens again and again and again. And so what the Gottmans realized was that there's this magic ratio of appreciations to criticisms. So just I guess if your listeners could think about how many appreciations does it take to offset one criticism, and the answer is It takes 20, 20 appreciations to offset one negative comment. So those negative comments get real loud in your brain when someone says something bad about you.
Mm.
So you have to have them say like 20 nice things about you on an ongoing basis so that they kind of have this analogy of a bank account, right? Like you have your withdrawals and your deposits. And, the withdrawals, the criticism, the deposits are the appreciation. So you have to constantly putting deposits into that emotional bank account for your relationship. And so, what does it look like? How do you say 20 nice things to
Of
your
course.
person?
Yeah.
And it's not every day. It's just like to kind of like keep things in check. And so the answer was, what I talked about that weekly meeting, you have 5 there. And
Yes.
then at the end of every night, you have 3 that you say at the end of the every night. So you have 3 things that you appreciate about the person times 7. That's 21 plus the extra 5. So now you've got 26 times that you've appreciated your partner, and to
Okay.
kind of offset that one time that like you might slip and say something not so nice.
Yeah. So you really have to pray that there's only one criticism.
A week, maybe, yeah.
Otherwise, you're going
But
to have be in the
I mean,
hundreds of
but
appreciations.
if you think about it, if you're in that mindset of looking for what's right, you don't look for what's wrong.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And it will become quite natural. Of course, it does take looking for it and with sincerity, isn't it? In sincerity and being very genuine about it when you're giving the appreciation. But it's why, like, when you have these practices in places, then you'll be able to, it just will be natural, just be normal and
absolutely.
natural to us. But I think that's such a profound statistic there in terms of what it takes in order to actually recover from
Yeah.
from that one criticism, which is important because as we know, our communication is the bedrock, the bedrock when it comes to our relationships and the way in which you say it. As you were saying before, I statements, rather than you finger pointing, those type of techniques. So it does take practice, and particularly during these more heightened times where people are feeling more maybe emotional, more sensitive around menopause and andropause as well. It's really important to be able to have those communication techniques, effective ones in place. So really appreciate that share. Really, I
Oh,
hope people are taking notes.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I send people to just gottman.com, gottman.com for more information. It's just fantastic. They have a wonderful weekly newsletter as well with lots of tips and tricks.
Oh, beautiful. I'm going to weave more because you have mentioned your husband before and the various different things that he's done in order to boost your mood, and you shared some techniques here. So before we move into the topic more about the personal relationships, is there any lasting message that you want to say to people on the topic of menopause and andropause at all?
Yeah, I think it's to find the community and the resources that you need, and we have a plethora of these at www.hotorjustme.com, and I encourage your listeners as well to use the discount code RLT, and they'll get 10% off of their order as well.
Which is fantastic. And you're going to find that in the show notes because please check them out. I'm going to have all of Karin's social links, including that link with the discount code there, RLT, because this is Relationship Talk, the podcast LLT. So please do check that out. So it's great that you have that resource. Actually, before we go on, can you talk a little bit more about what other resources? Because you spoke about products on your site. What else would they be able to find on your site?
Yeah, we have a lot of the tips and tricks and advice that I've shared here, as well as much more on different symptoms. And then we have a resource guide in terms of a library of articles for information beyond the symptoms that I've discussed. There's also some about bone loss, acupuncture, mental health, so much more. And then I'm working on a resource directory that's going to have a comprehensive list of practitioners that people can find either via telehealth, virtual, or in their zip codes.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely amazing. So, as I said before, it's going to be in the show notes. Be sure to check it out and get your discount as well there. So, you have spoken about your husband. And as part of this conversation, when it comes to the show, I always do tend to ask my guests, what are some of your key takeaways when it comes to your past relationships, your current relationships that you have experienced on the romantic front?
Uh, yeah, I think just that every relationship teaches you something about yourself, your personal limits, your likes, your dislikes, and that people change through time. I've been fortunate to have long relationships, 8 years, 4 years, now 15 years, right? Where I've changed and my partner changes. And so, the important thing is how can you change together and to have it be a constant communication because it is a dance, right? You're not always going to be changing at the same time or the same level of intensity or frequency. And you might be going through emotional changes or physical changes or, psychological or spiritual. There's so many realms to our who we are. And, to just realize that your person doesn't need to be exactly like you. You don't need a clone and to have different interests and different joys and different different expressions is totally fine. So that's something I definitely learned as time has gone on.
And I'm curious about the identity piece that you referred to at the start of our conversation as well. How did you navigate that?
I mean, that was tough. I think it was really challenging, especially because we had so many shared friendships. And, you build a community of other couples. Some couples start with one person in the relationship, so maybe there's still an alignment to that person because they work together or because, they built a closer bond or whatnot. You went on double dates a lot, and then that's, not something that you do anymore. And so that was really hard because I felt like I lost a lot of friendships in addition to losing my partner. So that was definitely one that was challenging. And then, just also like all this free time you suddenly have, right? Like you are now alone. And so you're like, okay, well, we used to do this activity, but I didn't really like doing that. So what do I want to do instead? Or, we used to, travel a lot together. So you're like, do I want to travel by myself? Or do I want to travel with girlfriends? And so just kind of having this, almost like a reinnovation of yourself, right? Like who do I get to be now? And that's scary for a little while until you realize that, the world is your possibility and that you can do anything. During that time in life, I found that I started pursuing a hobby that I always wanted to do. So I became a licensed pilot, and and so I learned how to fly. I got my private pilot's license, and was able to solo and take short trips in a Cessna, and it was just so freeing and cool and fun. And it brought me so much joy, and it was just something that I probably wouldn't have done had I still been, in that relationship.
Yes, that's amazing. And I love the way that your choice of words as well. Who do I get to be? What do
Yeah.
I get to do?
Yeah.
And that's so empowering because we get to do these things. And congratulations on the pilot.
Oh, thank you. It was super fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. I flew a helicopter once, but it was a small.
That's
Was
amazing.
it was so much fun. It was a small little helicopter, but I
Wow.
wanted to. I had goals as well, and I really wanted to hit the sky. So I absolutely love that you did that, and you've got that as well. So that's absolutely amazing the way that you were able to turn that loss into a gain as
It
well.
took a while for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't have all the answers. I definitely had moments where I was watching romantic comedies, eating potato chips,
Yeah.
and just like, drowning in my tears for a while there. But then, you kind of start to pull yourself out of it. You have friends that help you, and, you just start to accept all invitations, I think is another one.
Yeah. And so, talking about love as well. What's your personal definition of love
I
in a
knew you were going to
romantic?
ask me this, and it was such a thought-provoking question. I'd never taken a moment to think about, what is my definition of love. So I really sat with it, and I thought like it's very much the distinction between love and like, right? Like we like so many people. We like our friends and we love our friends, but we love our partner in a different way. But this idea of almost like being in like with someone, because there's moments where you're like, oh my God, I love you, but I don't like you right now,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so just kind of, I think putting in that effort to constantly being in like, as time goes on and just looking for, what drives this person? What are their interests? What's their inner world like right now? and just kind of having that same curiosity that you would have for a girlfriend or a friend, right? Of just, being curious about what's happening in the other person's world.
Curiosity is so important. And for people who follow the show, they will hear me talk about that a lot as well, because to still see our partner through the eyes and lens of curiosity, as in,
Yeah.
what more can I learn from you? Equally, and how can I use it? How can we come together with that curiosity? It keeps it spicy, in my
Yeah. Yeah,
opinion.
we have this idea that we know everything about them, that we've heard their stories, and
Yeah.
but the reality is we're all changing constantly. So who are they today? And who do they want to be tomorrow? And what are their goals and their dreams and their ambitions? And how do they feel about what's happening in the world, what's happening with their parents, what's happening with their children? Like, just getting real curious to your point.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, is that we don't have that curiosity. And exactly what you said, when it actually is quite like a red flag to me when people say, I know my partner. And I think, oh, really? Because then people are growing, people are changing. Yes, you will know certain elements of them. Of course, you're going to kind of have an understanding of them, but to say that person would not do that. Well, perhaps the version of that person might not have done that, but as
Yeah.
we grow and we evolve.
Yeah,
So
and we don't want to get lazy. We want to stay like, we want to make this last. And I know I've like talked about Common a few times, but there's this other app that they have it's like a phone app, and basically it's called Love Decks, and they're questions that you can ask each other on a date questions, date ideas, but also just they have a version that's called the salsa deck. And so it's like spicy, medium, and mild questions that you can ask each other about, what their interests are when it comes to love and sex, and to be able to be in that inquisition and just constantly be curious about what drives them now, right?
yeah, yes, absolutely. And I love the word spicy. It's showed up twice now. So
Yeah.
I really, really love your personal definition of love. And thank you for taking the time to explore that. And I asked that for that reason as well, because not many people have sat down. I'm not looking for a dictionary definition. I'm looking for a personal definition. And I thank you for taking the time to actually explore what that means for you, because I'm sure that's going to resonate with so many people who are also listening to this show.
Thank you.
So, Karin, this is going to bring our conversation to such a close. It's going to bring it to a close. And I thank you so much for what you have shared here. It's been such an educational piece for me too. I am going to be 41 in March. So I know I'm getting myself ready for the perimenopause symptoms. I don't believe I'm having them just yet, but it's really good that there's that saying, if you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready.
I love
So
it.
so thank you for helping our listeners to stay ready and to prepare themselves for it. We do have a closing custom on this show, Karin, whereby I like to ask my guests, what is one key takeaway that you could share to help our listeners on the journey of love, well-being, and relationships?
Oh, thank you for asking. I think the one that comes to mind is just to remind people that you are not alone, that this is a shared experience. We're all going to go through this if we're lucky, right, to live a long and happy life. And so just knowing that when you have those moments of, is this normal? What's happening? I feel so alone, just to know that you're not, and that there is a community of people out there in person and virtual, like here, that we've got you. So just
Yeah,
know that you're loved.
beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. Corinne, where can our listeners find you? Where are you hanging out? And have you got any events coming up as well that they might want to tune into?
Yeah, so no events coming up, but we can be found at hotorjustme.com. The link will be in the show notes. So I encourage your listeners to go there, because there will be a discount code, which is RLT, for 10% off of your order. So we can also be found on all socials at Hot or Just Me.
Brilliant. Corinne, thank you once again for being here, for sharing and imparting your wisdom and your guidance. Really do appreciate that.
Oh, I appreciate you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. And for everybody who has listened to this wonderful conversation, I want to thank you for your time, for your attention, and for your energy. And until the next episode, take great care of yourself and others too.